sequence of lab dips here that we had. So from top to bottom, we had our first round of lab dips, our second in the middle, and then our third on the bottom where we approved option B. So maybe on the screen and to some people, all of these colors look very similar. Again, when we took these outside, they looked very different. They had a very yellow casted view. And so that's why we ended up going into 3 rounds of lab dips. I would assume around 2 rounds of lab dips, like 1 to 2. Usually we don't have to go to 3 rounds of lab dips, but sometimes with neutral colors are just really hard sometimes for mills to match an exact standard. And that's just because of the calculation of dyes and how they go together and matching that exactly. So where we see more lab dips is in the khakis and the beiges and the browns and the grays. So just know that kind of going in that those might require a little bit of special attention.
I'm remembering some long days at the office now with grays. Grays were really tricky for some reason.
Yeah. I mean, they're so easily green casted or blue casted or yellow casted. There's just, you know, a little tweak can really kind of adjust that. So one other thing I wanted to call out too is that when you're reviewing these lab dips and comparing them and selecting one for production, I would recommend that you're looking at all of the submits that are in your garment. So sometimes one specific product will have a woven fabric and a knit fabric and some trims, and sometimes they're all the same color and they should be matching. Sometimes they're color blocked or contrast colors. It's a very good idea to review all of those submits together and to make sure that the components all look how you want them to look together. That can sometimes make it a little tricky. For this style specifically, this was paired with a pattern that had the gray in it. So it was making sure that the solid gray matches the gray in the pattern in the same shirt. So that's another reason why we got to 3 different lab dips as well.
That's a really good tip, especially things like zipper tape. I feel like, you know, you have to put it next to the body fabric or wherever it's going to be so that any zipper tape that's visible looks good too.
Absolutely. Okay, so that's kind of it for lab dips. Again, you're going to use your Pantone standard to review for the lab dips. And then once you approve a lab dip, then the mill goes into producing and dyeing your production fabric. So then now we're going to review strike-offs. So strike-offs are print review on fabric. So it's going to be a similar process, right size and what you're looking for. So, you know, this is the point in the process where you make those changes before you go forward.
Do you ever go through a process where maybe you do 2 versions of a print at the same time? Like a slightly larger version maybe? Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can ask for that. Sometimes mills will just do that for you. Sometimes they'll require, you know, an extra $25 or $50 fee for that. But absolutely, that's a good way. If you're unsure about something, that's a really good way of
like you just have to see it in person, right?
Yeah.
Yes, and then to make a decision and move forward.
Yeah, it's so hard to make these decisions off screens and like tiny little swatches, and you know, it's very normal to make changes through the process, every part of this process before you get to that pre-production approval.
Yes.
So the other thing that you'll be looking at is the registration of the print. So the registration of the print, so the registration of the print is how clear the print is on the fabric. So this is a snake print that we had printed, and and it turned out to be very small. So the detail of the print you can't really see. There's much more detail to it. So we decided to increase the size of the print so that the registration was more clear and you could really see all of the design and the scales in the snake print as well. So again, you know, we're adjusting in this process and making sure that we are getting the print that we want before we move forward and approving it for production.
This is such a great example because you never know how dyes will react to one another and on the fabric, and it's so many things are happening all at the same time to make this print happen. So like you might have seen this on a computer and it's perfect because it's an illustration, and then you see it on fabric and it starts to be a little blobby. A very technical term, you know. And so that's when you sit with your team and go, you know what, guys, we got to scale this up 10%, 15% to make it a little bit more crisp, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one difference between lab dips and strike offs is that you'll usually just get one strike off. You're not going to get 4 versions of a strike off. You're going to get one. That's the normal process. Again, like you mentioned, if you want to maybe inquire about 2 options, that's something to do as well. So in this process, you're going to review, you're going to give comments. You know, if this is too small, you want to increase it. You want to change a color, or this color isn't that close or needs to be, you know, a little bit darker or lighter, then they'll revise that and send you a revised strike off for you to review. Again, the same with lab dips. I would expect 1 round or 2 rounds. Anything beyond 2 rounds, it's maybe needs to be a discussion or something on why we're not hitting either the color or the print at that point. Yeah.
Okay. So plan for 2 rounds in development. Okay, got it.
I think that's just like a main rule is plan for 2 samples, plan for 2, kind of like in the whole product development process.
Okay.
So the same process here, you're going to get to a point where you can approve the strike off, and then the mill is going to print all of your production fabric. So then the next step after that is going to be your bulk fabric or your production fabric approval. The bulk fabric is a cutting of your actual production fabric that is based on what you approved in the lab dip or in the strike off. So the difference with reviewing this will be that you're going to compare it to the lab dip or the strike off that you approved. You're not going to compare it to the Pantone necessarily because the factory is going off of exactly what you approved. So in this image, we took the approved lab dip that we had, and I just put it on top of the approved bulk fabric, and it matches almost exactly. I will tell you that there are differences from going to lab dip to bulk fabric. Sometimes they can't match it exactly. Some mills that we work with say that there's like a 5 to 10% tolerance in color matching. I know that's a little bit hard to quantify when you're looking at color and what 5% or 10% is, but just know that that's kind of an industry standard. You know, there's so many things that can affect the actual color of the fabric. It could be the temperature, it could be the water that day. There's just so many different things. So but this is really your double check to say, okay, the color I approved matches the production fabric that I'm getting before they ship it to your factory and start production.
So just so everyone knows, bulk is the actual production run of the fabric that you're placing an order of. So, so if you have a really big problem with the bulk color for whatever reason, let's just say something really did happen, you know, these are considerations you might have to make into your timeline, because if you don't approve it, sometimes they can re-dye it, but it's not really recommended. You might have to start fresh and then wait 30, 45 days for your next. So sometimes you just move forward, you know, you kind of go, okay, we can fix this next time.
Absolutely. But another really good thing to do here is to, again, take all of the components from your exact garment or product and look at everything again as all of these bulks are coming in. And if there are variations, that everything still matches the way that you want to match it. all in one garment together or one product together. Yeah, so I always recommending kind of keeping all of your approvals together by style. So, and style and colorway, just so you have all of it in one folder and you can say, great, if I'm going to approve this gray, all of these things that I previously approved are going to work with that. And that's
beautiful
bulk fabric.
Yeah, that was such a great walkthrough, because I think a lot of times when I'm like verbally telling someone, you know, they're like, I'm like, you're gonna get these tiny little swatches and you're gonna have to approve them. So I understand that your team does this all day, every day with a lot of different clients. So you would be able to take on this process fully. And especially as you're working remote with a brand, they tell you their standard, you go through it with your expert eye and make recommendations, and also troubleshoot if, let's say, you go beyond that 2 round that you mentioned, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we do a lot of internal reviews here. We also do a lot of mentoring too, because ultimately our goal is to help our customers and clients be able to sustain and grow their business on their own. So we do a lot of that in-house for some larger brands, but we also coach a lot with launching brands as far as guiding them and teaching them the actual process so they can handle it on their own.
Yes, because you end up having so many colors in a collection and you want to be able to make some of those decisions on your own, considering everything else that's happening for that development. So that makes a lot of sense. The other thing that, you know, I wanted to mention to some folks is sometimes you have to think about if the fabric goes on top of something else too, right? And how they react to each other. So if you can, you might place your lab dip over your lining, for example, just to see what the finished garment might end up looking like. So it's like a 1,000-piece puzzle to put together any kind of you know, real world product, right? So you have to think about all of those things. Yeah. Well, I think that was a really kind of clean way to introduce lab dips and strike offs. And then if we have any, you know, if anyone that's watching this has questions, leave in the comments so that I can bug Alice to kind of dig through that a little bit more via the blog that she's going to write for us, so that she can really guide you guys towards like how to manage lab dips and strike offs. All right. Absolutely. Well, I'm going to let you go so you can enjoy the rest of your day. I really appreciate your time again. I think this has been such a like educational and easy to understand way to learn lab dips and strike offs as part of fabric sourcing.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to help. So thanks for having me.
Thank you again, Alice. I'll see you next week.
Okay. See you later.